How do we cope with pain? How do we cope, too, with emergencies that cause short-term, periodic pain? In other words, too, there are those who, as salesmen, urge us to find the pain points in others and minister to these. Yet, is that always a reality in these days, especially since 1951 with the advent of Thorazine, the first very powerfully numbing drug, and all the improvements to follow in terms of side effects and potency at the same time? Do we face as many pain points thus, is the question. I think it depends. It depends on how we handle our pains. And there are two classes of people, I believe, in general. Those who somehow face their pain and use short-term measures to cope with extraordinary pain points that you might say send us to the emergency room for some kind of tune-up, or say a vacation, or even as per the phrase, I need a stiff drink, noting not a drink every single minute called medicine or medication. Of course, then, there are the issues, too, of building what they call security or safety or islands, so that you experience a minimum of pain points in general. But how do we handle pain points that will pop up in all of our lives? Do we thus zone out, or do we have short-term measures to handle them until we reach a quiescent point again? Well, we used to always tear down the problems of alcoholism, or say the problems of sexaholism, the problems of overwork. But aren't these things often under our own control, more so than being forced upon us as drugs of choice, if you will? And the usage of any of these short-acting, and to me that's the crux here. Our prisons are full, maybe 80%, with people who have violated laws concerning drugs. And a recent article in a recent paper talking of how drug treatment programs are not addressing this very well. Russell Brand, also in England, has addressed the problem of rehab in England. He says only 1 in 10 people can get into a rehab program, and those who come out are often bitter to find they're now methadone addicts for life. And in our country, buprenorphine is also used popularly, and Suboxone. So the adage being, you go into a rehab program, you come out with a different set of addictions. Well, what different set of addictions, and what different coping drugs in general? The addictions I'm talking about coming out of a rehab program on, or with psych drug usage in general, being the long-term acting drugs that have like a half-life of some 3 weeks before you can discern a difference, even if you were to stop completely cold turkey using them. Whereas alcohol, or all the rest of these drugs, Keith Richards' pharmaceutical grade heroin, arguably meth use, very damaging to the brain, cocaine, did I mention, often used by the wealthy, all forms of short-acting drugs and under your own control as to whether you're going to choose or not long-term to use them. So our prisons are full of people who used short-acting drugs. Our prisons have no people in them who use long-acting drugs called medicines. And to me, that's an irony of ironies. Wouldn't we rather have usage of our drugs of choice under our control and not be told they're for use for some broken brain, but just an addiction that we then theoretically can work on with hope? So, that's the thing then. We have the phrase derogatorily, oh, so-and-so is a pothead. But even marijuana is short-acting, I think. I've never smoked it, but that's my perception. But you use a psychiatric drug of any sort, almost, it's going to have a very long duration, and thus a very different thing than being a pothead. It's more like going to sleep and not waking up for a long time versus going to sleep and waking up the next day. Use of these short-acting drugs being escapism, in a sense, of a short-term nature, like going on a vacation, or again, a stiff drink you say you need, or an entertainment session, so to speak, at the mall, or a concert, or a movie, or a dinner. But if you ate a dinner and it put you asleep for 3 weeks minimum, in which you basically couldn't function, you weren't addressing work, your clarity level down greatly, well then that's a totally different story, I think. And that's a major problem in our country today, I believe. And why we have so many of these problems. Our country is asleep at the wheel because it is zoned out on long-acting drugs and escapes, not short-acting ones. Yes, alcoholism, a big problem. Smoking, a big problem. All these other problems, drug problems, yes. But at least these drugs are short-acting and under our control, and not called medicine, and not called due to use of a broken brain. Although more and more it's claimed that we use all the short-term acting drugs because we have a genetic problem, which I disagree with personally. Thoughts here to consider then. Yes, alcoholism, for instance, is a big problem. Always has been. But to address our problems in the Rip Van Winkle fashion, where he took a substance and didn't wake up for some 50 years, to me, is much different than taking something and waking up the next day with a hangover even. Thoughts here.